Here we are, we're doing the wellness thing, we're committed to the lifestyle change, we know we need to clean up the diet, but where do we start? Is it gluten? Do we have to get rid of sugar? What's the most important thing? I'm Dr. Peter Minke, this is Minke Wellness, and the most important thing that you need to do, or we all need to do, to clean up the diet is to get rid of toxic fat. So let's talk about toxic fat. We've already mentioned the wellness strategy. The first, stop poisoning ourselves, and we talked about the 4 essentials for life. So we need to stop poisoning ourselves in the food category. And so for today, we're only going to talk about just getting rid of toxic fat, just exactly how bad toxic fat is, what does it have to do, how does it affect the body, what does it have to do with the respiratory system in particular, and so let's go through that. First of all, toxic fat. What do we mean by that? And that is dietary, anything that we're eating in that is hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. That's really what we're talking about. And you've heard of people use the word no trans fats or trans fats. And that's kind of in the same category, although I'm not sure it's exactly the same thing. But partially hydrogenated, if you look on the ingredient list and it says partially hydrogenated or hydrogenated vegetable oil, you don't want it, okay? We're going to do a lot of ingredient reading, label reading in our wellness course for our lifestyle changes. And so we'll go over some of these things. We'll share with you, what's in our pantry and how we pick out our food. We've got 5 children. How do you deal with this with larger families? We're going to go over a lot of that throughout the year. But right now, the first thing, the most important thing, in my opinion, this is my experience, the first thing that I had to get rid of in my wellness journey was the partially hydrogenated or hydrogenated vegetable oil. It's the thing that made me feel the worst instantly, okay? And here's what happens. The research on this is there's actually a lot of research on how bad hydrogenated vegetable oil is. And it was originally developed, I think, around in the 70s or so. And the idea was that it would allow things to be more shelf-stable. And the joke now is that they would pre-rancidify and make it rancid already so that it wouldn't spoil later. But basically, it was a way to change the fat to be more stable. It became, this is things like margarine, country crock, that kind of substance. Lard, I'm not even sure lard was in that category, but it's basically this way to bake something and keep it stable so that it wouldn't spoil. And it was a plasticized oil. That's what people have compared it to. And that actually seems to be more consistent with what I feel in my body. It's not really food anymore by the time they've done this process of hydrogenation, which is force hydrogen break all the bonds, all the double bonds that are in the fatty acid. So you've heard of saturated fatty acids or polyunsaturated fatty acids. A fatty acid is a long carbon chain, and if it's a fully saturated fatty acid, which means all the spots on the carbon chain are filled with hydrogen, there's no bonds, no double bonds in there, then that would be a completely saturated fatty acid, okay? And the saturated fatty acid gets a lot of bad rap dietarily because when your body receives this, it's very easy to cleave off the different parts of it and store it straight into fat, because our fat is usually stored in this form of fully saturated. So it just converts straight to fat storage. So that means that if your diet is in the equation of eating more calories than you burn, then that fat that you eat, saturated fat, is just going to go straight into storage. The flip side of it is that kind of fat, saturated fat, which is really coconut oil, is where we see it a lot of times in our current healthy diet. Coconut oil is fully saturated medium chain fatty acids. Well, that's not as important for this discussion here, but these saturated fats, again, they will definitely be stored as fat if you eat more than you burn. But if you actually are in a diet calorie reduction system where you're actually eating less than you burn, you're going to lose weight. And it's really good to eat that kind of fat because you end up increasing the metabolism of your own fat, the fat that's stored, and all the rest of that. So it turned out that as the research came out in the 70s, they said low-fat diet. It turned out that low-fat diet didn't actually help in the issues of heart disease, for example, and then it came out that it was really inflammation that was the big issue, not cholesterol. and not any of those other things. So the issue of hydrogenated vegetable oil initially was, sort of heralded as this, okay, we've now got this perfect fat or whatever, and it turns out to be actually really quite nasty. So get rid of the partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. What that means is you're really going to have to watch all your ingredient lists, all your labels, and it's happening more and more. It's just so much easier than it was for us 20 years ago when I was doing this for my own on my own wellness journey. It was so hard to find any prepared food that didn't have these hydrogenated vegetable oil in it, and so it's so much easier now. You can get even peanut butter in a glass jar that's got the oil on top. That it's okay to eat peanut butter, but you just don't want the hydrogenated vegetable oil. What does it do? Research shows that in the area of sports medicine, they were doing a lot of research that was showing the effects of this hydrogenated vegetable oil on the gut and absorption. And what they found was that it would inhibit the absorption of amino acids. And so athletes who were eating these the partially hydrogenated vegetable oil were ending up with muscle wasting. Despite the fact that they were eating protein and they were working out and they were doing all this stuff, they were actually getting muscle wasting. So definitely not in the area of our wellness if we want to have stronger muscles and bigger, better bodies and get ourselves fit. We definitely are going to be short-circuiting that system by eating partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. And the idea is, or hydrogenated. The theory in there was that the hydrogenated vegetable oil, and this is my understanding, so if I'm incorrect on this and someone wants to correct me, fine. But my understanding of the science of it is that these hydrogenated oils, instead of being in a nice linear form and nice straight form, they end up being kinked because the process of hydrogenation in a chemical synthesis kind of manner in a lab bends these things in ways that are not natural. So these kinked fatty acids get into the membranes of our cells and block the ability of the cell to be fluid. In other words, the cell membrane stiffens up. This is critical because the membrane around the cell, every cell in the body is fat, is made up of fat. And if you damage the membrane's ability to be fluid, it inhibits the cell's ability to communicate to the outside. It also, for cells that are highly productive, in other words, like the mucus lining of the lungs, the cells in the lining of the lungs are producing a lot of mucus, and they're having to kick this mucus outside the cell and produce that, and the little cilia beat inside, on the surface of that. There's a lot of activity in the membrane of those cells, and so junking those up creates a big problem for the digestive system and for the respiratory system, okay? So this is why I'm saying that it's one of the top food categories that you maybe they've dropped off the importance list because, we're always more important, now all of a sudden gluten's more important or whatever. So this is one of the things, very simply, get this out of your diet, eliminate it, don't avoid it, actually eliminate it, get rid of it entirely. So if you're going through your ingredient list and you're watching your labels and it says hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, forget it, that never makes it to our shelf, okay? We don't eat it. Eating out becomes a little tricky. You've got to know what restaurants are making sure that they say we don't have trans fats, we don't have, we don't use that stuff. And more that's happening, so I'm not going to provide you a list because it's changing all the time, but there are definitely more and more places that you can eat where they say, oh no, we don't use that. So that's great. It's happening. We're winning the culture battle when it comes to the natural clean living and wellness. And so we got to keep it up and keep the pressure on. Okay, so that's the simple lesson for today, and that we're going to carry on for the rest of the month and quarter. We're going to get rid of that partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, and we'll have other things that we can watch out for. Hey, watch out for it. We found it over here, Maybe we can, I'll pitch in and share where we're finding hidden areas where this is. Okay, so we finished out our week here. We've done our breathing. And hopefully you've been continuing your breathing exercises and doing some inhalation with some essential oils. And so next week we're going to go into getting more in touch we'll start our supplement regime, and we'll get more in touch with the respiratory system, talk about anatomy and physiology of the respiratory system. So happy wellness. We'll see you next week.